All righty. We are back. It is Tailgate Trash Talk, episode 19. I got my man Gary Freeze next to me. Gary, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing good, man.
Good.
Good to be back. It's good
It
to
is
be
good to be
back.
back.
How you doing?
Can't complain. I'm happy to be back. Sorry, about last week. But we got a great episode tonight.
Yes, sir.
1 week away from NFL draft. So we got some early preseason top 10 rankings. We got coaches' comments. We got spring ball. We got it all.
Yes, sir.
So without further ado, good morning, good evening, whenever the fuck you're listening. This is Tailgate Trash Talk, episode 19. Gary Freeze, Big Stove here. And so let's get right into it. We got some spring ball going, okay? Got some spring ball. I have not watched a lot of spring ball. Spring ball to me just doesn't excite me.
Spring ball's for the local fans.
Yeah.
That's always been my impression of it. I enjoy reading, the kind of synopsis of what happened at the spring games, right? Is there a position competition heating up? Did the freshman outperform the junior, the senior, that sort of stuff? So it's interesting to read that. But I think from a tailgate perspective, especially, we have spring ball. That means we're getting closer to the season.
We are,
despite being a few months away, but we are getting closer to another season. So that's excellent to kind of get that feeling. You start to get the juices flowing a little bit. But yeah, it's been interesting to kind of read, a little bit of what's going on. There's some optimism down in Tallahassee, which, they are who they are. But for a program that was so storied under Bobby Bowden, it's interesting that they seem to feel pretty good about where they are. So we may see them get back on the national stage. But yeah, other than that, spring ball is hard to watch too because it's very scripted. It's practice.
It is.
It's not.
Yeah, it's not a lot of tackling.
Game, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and not a lot of tackling in some places as well. Obviously you don't want to get anyone injured. Especially in April or early May in some cases, to where one of your star players could be could, God forbid, tear an ACL or whatnot and be done for the season.
Yeah, for sure. Those injuries, they can happen, but yeah, you don't want to have that in spring ball. So you control it, the atmosphere. And like I said, if I lived in Tallahassee, if I lived in Columbus, if I lived in Tuscaloosa, I'd probably go, right? If I was a big fan and it's open and you can kind of see a little bit of a preview of what to expect for the upcoming season. But on the national stage, it's more of an item of intrigue that spring ball is happening.
And, I think especially too, where you get more, I guess, more optimism, more hype is around some of these programs that may be starting over with new head coaches. Yep. Florida Gators, USC now with Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma with Venables now. Some of these schools, some big storied schools have some new head coaches now. And so I think a lot of hype, where you get, I would say, more fan base showing up, to these spring games is in some of these locations where you have new head coaches, new coaching staff. It's funny you mentioned, local. Okay. Being a Nebraska guy, Nebraska, I mean, they always have a great turnout for their spring game, 50, 60,000 plus, every single, but it's the only town or it's the only game, in the state of Nebraska. I think this year they had like 55,000 plus. the first year for Scott Frost, they sold that thing out, 90,000 plus, for a spring game.
Yeah.
For a spring game. And then you have programs like Miami. Okay. Miami really doesn't have a true home stadium. Okay.
True.
You had the Hard Rock, whatever. It's not a true home stadium. Okay.
Yep.
But what they do is somewhat interesting, and I get the logic behind it. They have their spring game in some of these local city stadiums or high school stadiums where it only fits, 15, 20, maybe 25,000 people, but they use it as a recruiting tool in those areas. So that can be played, some of these numbers for spring games, everyone gets into the big numbers and everything. It's just like, it's a spring game, I get it's football, but you're really not watching, the starters out there, for 3-4 consecutive series. You're
Right.
trying to get some of these other guys in there, some of the newer guys, or maybe some transfers that you got in the winter season, and just seeing what they can do, out on the open field against some competition.
Yeah, just trying to see what you got for sure, and especially the new guys, right? It's an opportunity for them also to kind of show this is the vision for our program. This is how we're going to structure things. This is how we're going to run, because not everybody runs their spring game the same way.
Yeah.
It's kind of a mirror or a shadow of, what the coach does on a daily basis, right? Alabama's is pretty structured. Saban's got it down to a very, excuse me, very scripted, very controlled, this is what we're going to show. We're going to run, 8 plays with the ones, 8 plays with the twos, 8 plays with the threes, and everybody's going to get to watch that. And the media is going to have some, access to that. And then, it's the vanilla stuff, and we're going to do that. But then you got these other, like Jim Harbaugh took the Wolverines on the road for their spring game one year. So, and he flat out said, it's a recruiting opportunity, right? Like you mentioned with Miami, it's a recruiting opportunity. You show up and you show off the maize and blue, or you show off the U, and those are the things that athletes are going to see. And then you catch their attention, and you start to get some of these big time recruits, especially in a football hotbed like Florida, right?
Oh yeah,
like
sure.
You're going around and you're showing off the U to a bunch of guys that can play the fucking game, because Florida's got a ton of talent. So
yeah,
it is a great opportunity for, these coaches to one, get to see what they've got, but also kind of show off what they've got as well.
Yeah. And one other thing that's interesting too, and you mentioned Saban with Alabama and how they're structured and how they do things. I didn't watch it, but I heard a lot of talk about it after the fact. And I mentioned just a little bit ago that you're not seeing your starters for 3-4 consecutive series. Saban has a different approach to it.
Mm-hmm.
He had Will Anderson. He had Bryce Young. He had his starters out there for damn near 3 quarters of their spring game. And someone made a comment on that it's interesting how he does that, because we mentioned you don't want to get players injured, or you want to get a lot of people some reps that you may not necessarily know or have had the opportunity to get those reps. Whereas these guys in Alabama, they're full on starters. They played a full 13, 14 games last year against some solid competition, made it to the national championship, and here they are in spring ball playing 3 out of 4 quarters.
Yep.
And I think, I don't know if it's a mind game with Saban to the other coaches, but at the same time, he's already preparing his players at, this early in the season. Like, we're already talking about 2022, 2023 right now. Okay. He's already preparing his players to go that deep into, again, it doesn't matter if it's spring ball, and so I think, and you can't argue with him. Look what he's done.
Yeah. The track record speaks for itself,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on Saban and playing his so-called starters,
Yeah.
3 out of 4 quarters in a spring game?
Yeah, he's very deliberate about it. It's interesting to think about it from the perspective of, also, you mentioned their schedule last year, right? Their tough schedule. What better competition than to play against the runner-up for the national championship, right? So let's get some reps out there and get some of this kind of heated competition against some of the best guys on the planet. And it is a different approach, but it's also, it's very much that Bill Belichickian, Nick Saban, those hardball, old school of coaches. It's sort of the same approach when you talk about, the inter squad games or the inter squad practices that, the Pats and some of the other teams will have in the NFL. It's the same sort of thing. They go hard, and you hear about them getting in scrums and getting in tiffs and whatnot. And I think that competition breeds better competition, right? And you've got Saban, who he's out there. He's very deliberate. Everything's very structured. He's thinking about you mentioned it, 2022, 2023. He's not thinking of this is just a spring game. This is an opportunity for him to show, hey, this is Alabama football. This is how we do things. Second place is not good enough for a Nick Saban coached team, and he wants to set that tone in the spring, and that's what he's doing with this extended play for the starters. He's very deliberate with it.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. So it's definitely interesting just to see the different dynamics of how spring games are played. We mentioned that before. Some of these higher profile schools like Alabama, Georgia, USC, Texas, who they have their own network, but some of these spring are televised, and and locally too. In your local areas, they're probably televised, but nationally, like on ESPN2 or ESPNU or whatever, these spring games are being televised, and it's just another recruiting tool for them as well. We talk all the time about how much money college football brings in. Here's another example. It's April,
and you're getting TV time.
And you're getting TV time. Yeah.
That also is another tool that separates the haves from the have-nots too, though, right? Because like Boise State's spring game isn't on ESPN, but Alabama's is, and some of the bigger ones, they are. So that's yet another, tool that kind of separates those haves from the have-nots. So that's just kind of the other perspective of that too, is it just shows how much further ahead these big time programs are in terms of that generation of revenue, TV dollars, being on TV, being in the spotlight. And that's also a recruiting tool itself too. Hey, we're on TV, right?
Yeah.
If Alabama's recruiting against Missouri, right, to get a big time recruit, it's, hey, did you see our spring game on ESPN? Do you want to be on ESPN in April, right?
Exactly.
Or do you want to have to wait till you play Alabama in August or September to get on TV? So
yeah, for sure. Well, moving on from some spring games, let's stick somewhat in the college football realm of coaching, and two different items here. But one, 2 weeks ago, Dabo was, interviewing and was kind of just asked, some questions about recruiting and transfer portals and everything like that. So let's look and see what he had to say on this. And do you understand when people say, well, coaches like Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban are making, in the 10 millions dollars, shouldn't the athletes be able to profit even before they get on campus? And this is Dabo's response to it was, well, Nick Saban is 70 years old. I'm 52. None of us set markets on what we do. We live in a capitalist society, and Delta probably makes a lot more than the people who are checking your baggage in. but those people are as,
vital to the
as anybody. Yeah, to the process. None of us set markets on what we do. It's a free market we live in anything. It's just that our jobs are so visible and so public. I can tell you this. None of us got into coaching to make money, but I don't apologize for being successful. So what are your thoughts on Dabo's comments here?
I'm so very disappointed in the tone of his response because he completely ignored the question, essentially, in my book, and made it a look at me, look at how successful I've been, look at how hard I've worked to get to where I'm at or whatever. And like, that wasn't the question, right? The question was, should these students be allowed to profit even before they get on campus, these student athletes? And yeah, they brought up the coach's salary, but it wasn't about the coach's salary. It was about the disparity, right? You have these coaches making $10 million, and these athletes have been essentially had the thumb placed on their heads for, decades, while these coaches' salaries inflated, and the boosters continue to just grease the skids there. It's just so tone deaf to me for him to talk about a free market, to talk about capitalism, and try to compare it, because the question was about a free market. It was literally about a free market for these student athletes to be able to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. And he answered that question with a response to essentially to reinforce the question, but he said it in such a way that it was so condescending that he made it sound like he was disagreeing with the sentiment of the question, when in all reality, what he said is just another notch in the belt for this NIL thing is happening. It's real, and it should have happened a long time ago. And I'm very disappointed, because I always thought Dabo was very calculated in his responses. And, I just thought he was better than this in terms of his understanding of where NIL is and where it needs to be. We don't need coaches saying things like this, because it's just going to turn this thing into, a more sour thing than it is. I'm just, my whole emotion after seeing Dabo say that was I'm disappointed, man.
So you said a key word to me that I agree with you in this key word, and the key word was condescending. Mm-hmm. It did sound like he was coming off as condescending. Here's my argument against that. Okay, against your opinion of it. We're all entitled to our own opinions and everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
But before NIL became NIL, the coach down at Alabama, Nick Saban, was totally against NIL as well. He's just embraced it now. Whereas Sweeney, he hasn't fully embraced it, just like he hasn't embraced the transfer portal. Okay. And that brings me to my next point with him. And something that, he made this comment, and I wholeheartedly agree with. I like Dabo as a person. I like him as a coach. But he said, we're not going to go to the transfer portal all the time. We'll go to the transfer portal if that player fits what we are doing, here as a family, as a cultural, and, just fits, hand in hand. I'm not going to go out to the transfer portal, and I'm putting, some words in his mouth right now, but I'm not going to go to the transfer portal just to get 4 or 5 stars, right, just because they left Alabama or left Georgia. That's not what I'm going to do. They have to fit right. And I thought that was a very, very good explanation of why he hasn't gone to the transfer portal like a lot of these other colleges and coaches. And an interesting fact that I saw or I heard, I believe it was yesterday, out of Sweeney's like 180 16 or so college seniors that he's had, 109 of them have graduated with degrees.
That's killing it.
Exactly. And that's what he's also saying, we as a culture and as a society, as football colleges and coaches, I think we've lost sight of what these student athletes are here to get and to do. Student first, athlete second. Now, I know that's not everyone's, priority or agenda.
Right.
We see it all the time in college basketball. A lot of one and dones to a lot of your, big name schools, your Duke, your North Carolina, USC, Baylor, wherever, a lot of those schools are seeing, one and dones. Whereas college football, you have to play 3 years. College baseball, 3 years. You don't see one and dones in volleyball or soccer or anything else like that, but you do see it in basketball. But just the way that Dabo explained the transfer portal and all of that, it really resonated, because I think, what Dabo has built there in Clemson since he became coach, I think it resonates with a lot of people. Like, he hasn't needed to go to the transfer portal to win. He's won with the players that they have recruited.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with you wholeheartedly about his stance on the transfer portal. I love it. I think more coaches taking that stance would start to quell some of these guys that are jumping the transfer portal just to make a move, right?
Mm-hmm.
They get where they get, and I don't really like the situation here for X, Y, or Z reason, and they just jump into the transfer portal. I think if more coaches acted like Dabo and said, we're not just going to grab 4 stars just to grab 4 stars, 5 stars, whatever, and recruit for that cultural fit, that fit within the system, those sorts of things, we'd probably see less players just jumping into the transfer portal, and we wouldn't have to lean heavily on the NCAA and say, hey, fix this fucking system because you broke it. Now we got to fix it.
Yeah.
I think if more coaches had that stance, I agree wholeheartedly on that. The snippet about the salary, I just that part really with me, it just didn't sit well. But yeah, I agree with you entirely about the transfer portal stance. It's awesome that he takes that stance. It's great to see an organically built program. And I wish we had more coaches that were like that.
Yeah, and the whole salary thing, it's one of those things where he wasn't making what he's making 10, 11 years ago.
Right.
He's making what he's making now because of what he has built and what he has done all those years in between. What has he done? He's won football games.
Yep.
He's
been to 4 natties and won one?
Yeah, he's brought you back to national prominence. So in order to keep a coach like that, schools are having to pay. I mean, just look at what Michigan Texas A&M,
State,
like all these,
Jimbo,
what have they done? They really haven't done anything. Okay, Dabo's won a national championship. He's been to the conference championship games. He's been to the national championship games. Okay, Brian Kelly with Notre Dame, now of LSU. Yeah, he's been into the football playoff.
They've been a participant.
Yeah, look at the contract he got.
Yeah,
Jimbo Fisher. Yes, you won a national championship. At Florida State. Now you're at Texas A&M. In the SEC, and now you're competing with the likes of Alabama, Georgia, Florida. All these schools now. And what have you done there? You beat Alabama this past year. You got that. Okay.
Great moment.
Yeah. But yet he got that huge contract extension because of him bringing, A&M back to national prominence a little bit. Kevin Sumlin, kind of had them in that category with Johnny Manziel.
They just couldn't sustain it.
Yeah, just couldn't sustain it. Now Jimbo Fisher's kind of brought them back up, brought a lot of hype, has the #1 recruiting class right now. And so I think with all of that, yes, colleges, boosters and everything, they see that. They see what they're bringing to the table right then and there. And, when that LSU job came open, it was another SEC school. So, yeah, Texas A&M kind of had to play a move because Jimbo's name was getting thrown around in the mix of coaches. So I get that. But at the same time, the schools, the state, the boosters, they're the ones that are paying those contracts.
Yeah.
As ridiculous as it may seem, I mean, Michigan State, two years in as a head coach, got a 10-year contract. 2 years in.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money being thrown around, but we've said it almost all season long too. College football keeps the wheels churning at these universities. And I don't like to single college football out because there are a lot of other college sports, that bring in revenue, but not like college football.
On the scale of football.
Yeah. And so, it's just fascinating to see, what these colleges pay these coaches in certain areas, and just the money that they throw around. It's just stupid, crazy.
Yeah, for sure. They're just fucking printing money.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got those two things knocked out. I want to get to another college coach and college player, but first let's take a break, a little sponsor break here, real quick, and we'll get to that. And our sponsor for this first break is brought to you by Pocket Pair Club, pocketpairclub.com. Pocket Pair Club, club number 26881. All right, that little sponsor break was brought to you by pocketpairclub.com. Pocket Pair Club, club number 26881 for all your gambling needs. Okay, so I mentioned before our little break that I wanted to talk about a college player and another college coach that kind of made the headlines 2 weeks ago as well. And this is coming out of the state of Texas. You're going to have to help me with the name of the player, but Oji Abajo?
Yeah, that was close. That's close.
Yeah, defensive end for the Texas Longhorns, and he was being asked a question, I believe on Friday or Saturday, and it was basically what needs to change, and what's the culture like, and this and that, and he basically said that the culture has sucked. Players are not getting on board with what needs to be done. There's certain players that are more interested in going to parties or, chasing tail, whatever, rather than football, committing to football. And so he didn't call anyone out by name. He just said certain players. And so he said it needs to stop. That's how we're going to get better, is the focus needs to be on football and not these other areas. So that was Friday, I believe. Then on Monday, Steve Sarkisian, head coach for the Texas Longhorns, basically called him out and said that, he doesn't need to be doing that. And, that we need to keep things in-house, in family. Those are, things that need to stay indoors, so to speak. And basically told the reporters that Abajo is not available for any comments. And it was kind of like for the near future, or so Gary, let me ask you a two-part question. What do you think of Abajo's comments? And what do you think of Sarkisian's reaction / comments the following Monday?
I like the player's comment. I don't love Sark's comment, but I know he had to do it, right? Honestly, I like when players are willing to put their stamp on holding other players accountable. Now, if he's out partying and partaking and whatnot, of course, he's not setting a good example, but I do like that. There's no stronger voice in a locker room to me. I always thought the coach's voice is plenty strong, but the strongest voices that you hear in a locker room are those leaders that are on the field battling with you day in and day out. And for a player like this to come out, put his stamp on it and say, if we're going to get better, we've got to take it seriously. I like it. Sark, on the other hand, it's sort of, to me, it almost embarrasses the student athlete who was just trying to be a leader in the locker room. And, I get why he had to do it, right? You can't just have players out in the media fighting with each other and whatnot. If there's the back and forth, that's a bad thing. But for a guy to come out and say, if we're going to get better, we've got to focus on getting better, right? Being out at the club is not going to help us get better on Saturdays. I like that. I like it. And, it is what it is from Sark. Like I said, he's got to do it as the coach. He's got to show that he's in control. But I like what the players out here saying.
I have an issue with this, and it's mainly Sark. Actually, it's all Sark. Your defensive starter, who is a star for you last year, did not call out any teammates by name.
Exactly.
He basically called everybody out as a collective group. And you mentioned it. You'd like to see that from your leaders. Yeah. Okay. He did not call anyone out by name.
It was so much of a we, not me comment. It was good.
Exactly. The issue that I have is Sarkisian coming out on Monday and doing the exact opposite of what you want to do. You just singled out your star player, who did not single out any teammate whatsoever. He was doing what he thought was best and what was needed for your team to succeed this next year. Let's be honest, Sark. You didn't have a great season. You lost to Kansas. Yeah. Okay? Kansas in football has not been relevant since Mangino.
Yeah.
Okay? It's been a long 15 years. Yep. Okay? You're in year 2, bud. You want your star player to hold people accountable. What you just told him is that he cannot hold people accountable by what you did, because
you know how hollow his voice rings in the locker room now too.
Oh,
he says something to another player like, shut up.
Yeah, to be honest with you,
he's got no leg to stand on.
It would not surprise me if we saw his name in the transfer portal before it was said and done.
Maybe.
Or the deadline.
Yeah, maybe.
You said it. You want that as a coach. You want that in your players.
Yep.
Okay? I saw nothing wrong that he did. He didn't call anyone out by name. He was just telling you what the culture has been like and that it hasn't changed. And in order for Texas football to get better, these are the things that need to change. If you're not going to change and get with the program, get off the team. And yep. Sark's comments and basically, pointing the finger directly at him and making him look like a puppet, basically, putting him out there and telling the reporters, you're not going to be talking to him for, extended period of time.
Yeah. Like I'm going to keep the toddler off the camera.
Yeah.
Essentially. And there's a number of ways he could have gone about that better. He could have led with, I like his passion. I like his fire. What he said is true. We need to get better. We need to have a better culture in the locker room. Yeah. But, we don't need to be singling out players. We're not going to have players going back and forth in the media. Nip it in the bud. But don't embarrass the player. Don't make him the focal point of like this nonsense now that he's going to get questions all the time about, how's your players in the locker room? How are they responding? Those sorts of things. And if they struggle at all during this season, the questions are going to come. Are your players still out at the club all the time? Are they playing video games in the locker room instead of lifting weights or working out or studying film, right? He's going to get those questions, man.
Well, and to be honest with you, I can totally see him pulling a Marshawn Lynch here and be like, no comment. Or
I'm just here so I don't get fined.
Exactly.
I'm just here so Sark won't say anything.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
so sure.
It's not good.
No, not a good look for Texas football. Not a good look for Sark. I think probably 95% of college football and college coaches would probably agree, with that comment, and I'll make a quick example here before we get to another sponsor break. When Scott Frost took over at Nebraska, and I hate to keep throwing Nebraska out there, but that's my team. You had a lot of guys quit the program, or a lot of guys that were not getting on board. And you had certain players, mainly on the defensive and offensive lines, and you even had your quarterback say, hey, if they don't want to be here and they don't want to jump on board with what we're trying to build here, go.
Bye.
And what did Scott Frost do after those comments were made? Yeah, we have guys here that, are not 100% committed. They're not on the team anymore. And he stood by his players who did not call anyone out by name. They called the team out as a collective group. And I think if a player does that, and you said it too, your coach needs to stand by those players that do that the right way. And that's what he did. Sark just went about it a different way. And in a lot of public opinion, he went about it the wrong way.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right. Enough of that talk. We'll get to our next sponsor break, and we'll finish this episode with a little too early preseason top 10. But our next sponsor break is brought to you by XL Construction. XL Construction out of Overland Park, Kansas. For all your construction needs, give Ryan Trontenac with XL Construction a call. That sponsor break was brought to you by XL Constructions out of Overland Park, Kansas, for all your construction needs. Real quick before we get to the early top 10, quick shout out to Talia Stovall, Mark McFadden, and Mr. Gary Free Sr., who never seems to miss an episode except for that one time. We appreciate you guys showing up and commenting tonight. Really do appreciate it. So
absolutely. And Mark, esports is a thing now. They're talking college level scholarships, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
And I know George Mason up here in my area, we have a gaming department. So,
Really?
yeah. So
I think it started
esports
becoming
is real, man.
Yeah, I think it started becoming prevalent maybe about 2 years ago that schools were starting to give scholarships to that. So,
yep, for sure.
I mean, a lot of people are getting paid right now for it.
Yep,
So,
absolutely.
All right, way too early preseason top tens here. Gary, I apologize. I did not get a chance to do some overlays on this, but I have them right here in front of me. So we'll go through them real quick. And this is ESPN's preseason top 10 based on FPI here. Okay. So throw anyone out of here that just sticks out like a sore thumb. Okay. They have Alabama 1, Ohio State 2, Georgia 3, Clemson 4, Notre Dame 5, Texas 6, Michigan 7, Oklahoma 8, Pittsburgh Panthers 9, Auburn 10.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on ESPN's preseason top 10?
I have some major quibbles with ESPN's. Clemson's too high. I get that this is based on their FPI and they have mathematical calculations for it, but Clemson's too high. That was not a good team last year. I don't care how you think they finished the season. That was not a good team. They played in a bad
team.
Right, and they played in a bad ACC, and they were not good. You know, I hope they get the offense figured out, but losing Brett Venables is a big deal for that team.
Mm-hmm.
I think Clemson's too high. I probably would put Georgia over Ohio State, but that's kind of, splitting hairs. Notre Dame at 5, they retained a ton
of defense
talent there. So I could see Notre Dame being, a top 5 team. Texas at 6. I noticed, like, I saw Pitt the other day when we were talking about this. I saw Pitt and I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I didn't even notice.
I'm the same. I was the same way.
I glanced
over Texas. Yeah.
That's fucking insanity to me. So I think I'm good with like 6 of these teams being in the top 10. Probably not in the order that they're in, but I'm out on Texas. I'm out on Pitt. I'm not in on Oklahoma either. I'm curious how they're going to handle the quarterback turmoil there. Venables' first season. I think they could go through some growing pains. And Auburn, like, I know they finished
through some coaching adversity. Right. Yeah.
So I think I'm good with like 6 of these teams.
I'm, to be honest with you, I'm the same way. Texas, obviously, and the 4 teams that you're questioning, I'm questioning as well too. Texas, I don't see at all. I think I just really don't think that they're going to be prevalent at all, but they might be this year, and because like you said, with Oklahoma, the QB turmoil, installing a new system, even though Venables has been a great defensive-minded coach with Clemson and everything. Sometimes it takes, a couple years to get your players in there to run the system that you want to run. Yeah. So I look for this to be a down year for Oklahoma as well. Pitt, wow.
They must really feel good about the backup quarterback there.
But here's the thing, though. You lost your OC.
Yeah, you lost your quarterback's coach, your offensive coordinator. You lost Pickett.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Auburn, shoot. With everything that's gone on with the internal investigation, with the head coach and the players and the treatment and everything else like that, I just don't see it. I really don't.
No, and I've got a team from Texas in my top 10, but it ain't the fucking Longhorns. I can tell you that.
No, definitely not. Definitely.
And where's the love for our guy up there in Stillwater, man?
Gundy.
I'm a man. I'm a man. They finished in the top 10 last year, and they're returning. Yeah. They're returning. I think they're returning like 18 starters or something.
Yeah.
Something like that, and they had a really good recruiting class. I think Oklahoma State's the team that I would probably get up there. You know, again,
Arkansas, maybe.
I have a team from Oklahoma, but not the one that they have. But yeah, Arkansas, right? They seem to have some sustainability there with the style of football that they play. It's a tough SEC, but yeah, I'm this. I get that it's all math, but I don't love it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So moving on from ESPN's,
sorry, that's my little league team.
Moving on from ESPN's way too early preseason top 10. We're going to move over to Anthony Trash. Yeah, basically.
According to this list, he's
yeah, exactly.
Although his isn't as bad as ESPN's, I have to say that.
I will agree with you there. Alabama 1, Ohio State 2, Georgia 3, Clemson 4, Michigan 5, A&M 6, Utah 7, USC 8, Oklahoma 9, Wake Forest 10.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of doing exactly here what I did with Texas.
You looked over Utah.
USC. Oh. No, not even Utah. Like I'm actually I can be swayed on Utah. I don't know that I would have put them in my top 10. They're in my top 15, though. I will say that. That's a really good team that finished last season strong. If they can carry some of that momentum over they're returning a lot of guys too. USC, though, like I get the Lincoln Riley effect, and everybody's going to feel real good about Lincoln Riley, but that's a team that doesn't have a lot of talent on the roster.
Yeah.
He's gonna need a year, 2 years, get a couple recruiting classes in there, because that is not a talent-rich squad there. So I'm out on USC. I'm also way out on Wake Forest. I'm not sure how anybody could put them in their top 10 and keep their credentials, to be completely honest. I know Wake Forest was like the last undefeated team in the Power 5.
They were in the ACC.
Right.
It was a bad year for the ACC.
It was a bad year for a perennially bad conference. The last decade, the ACC's been down, and last year was like a real down year for them. Yeah. So I think it's the same effect that probably with Pitt, like everybody's like, oh, yeah, they finished the season really well. They also were playing awful teams. If Clemson's going to be number 4, you can chalk up another loss for Wake, another loss for Pitt, and you're already at the point where, like, who else is Wake going to drop one too? I'm out on Wake.
Yeah.
No, I don't know that they're a top 25 team for me.
Their scoring offense last year was excellent. Yeah. I mean, but that defense
was anemic.
That defense was quite opposite.
Yeah. What was that game against the Air Force? 71 to 68 or something?
It was crazy. It was like almost 150 points between the two schools. It was stupid.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So yeah. I'm in Utah for me. Yeah, I mean the conference that you play in, I can see that. USC, I'm totally with you. I think 2 years. I think if they, 4, maybe 5 wins this year, I think, with everyone that they have,
Lincoln may be able to coach him up to maybe they'll make a bowl.
Maybe be bowl eligible. Yeah.
That's not a good roster.
No. And then
I might just have a soft spot for Utah because of what they did to Oregon last year. Maybe I'm all in on Utah because they saved us from that fucking nonsense.
Right. But yeah, I'm in total agreement with you on Wake Forest. I just don't see it at all.
I see Pitt more than I see Wake Forest because Pitt's got a good defense. And we did see that backup core. I forget his damn name, and I should have looked it up because I was thinking about him the other day. We did see him play last year, and he was okay, but small sample.
small sample with the new OC and everything.
Right.
It's not jiving too well.
No, I could be more convinced on Pitt than Wake Forest, though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree with you there. So,
yeah.
Well, that is some way too early preseason top 10s by two totally different people there.
Yeah.
But, it is what it is. That's why I call it preseason, because it will go up and down throughout the year. And as spring ball comes to an end and we get closer to August, September for opening week 0. One thing before we break, next week is the NFL draft. Gary and I, we will be doing a show next week, but it's not going to be on Wednesday. It will be on Thursday for draft night, and we will cover the first round. We won't be streaming it on here because that is frowned
Facebook doesn't like that.
Yeah, they do not like that, but we will have it on in our backgrounds, watching it with you, and just comment on where some players are taken compared to where we thought some players were taken or not taken. Yeah. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on everything too. So join us next Thursday. What time does the draft start? 8:00?
I believe coverage starts at 8. The first pick should be on the clock. I think it's around 8:15, maybe as late as 8:30. So
go figure.
Yeah.
Go figure. 11:30. Here we go.
Mm-hmm. It'll be a late night.
Late night. So join us next week at 8:00 for Tailgate Trash Talk NFL Draft, and we'll just see where our picks land us and see who comes out on top here.
Yes, sir.
Real quick before we go, who's your number one pick?
I'm starting to get swayed by the momentum that Trayvon Walker is carrying right now. Trent Baalke is the X factor for me. So he's the GM now in Jacksonville. And I got to give credit to Peter Schrager. He was kind of the first one who started to turn me on this.
You had
Aiden
Hutchinson.
I didn't even have Trayvon Walker in my top 10.
No, you did not.
But I'm getting swayed because Peter Schrager mentioned Trent Baalke is the GM there in Jacksonville, and he loves drafting the best athlete at defensive edge rush positions. He did it with Alden Smith and Eric Armstead and several other guys in San Francisco when he was the GM there. So I'm starting to get swayed a little bit on the Trayvon Walker train, but I still think Aiden Hutchinson is the most polished product and probably should be the first pick.
I'm going to disagree with you on that, and we can talk more about that next week during our live broadcast for the NFL Draft. I had Evan Neal out of Alabama.
That dude looks like Aaron Donald on the offensive line.
I'm going to stick with him. You had a number one pick last year, and you drafted a franchise quarterback. If you still think he is your franchise quarterback, you need to protect him at all costs.
Yeah.
This is why I think you need to go with an offensive lineman and not a defensive end. If the Jaguars do anything right this season, they need to draft offensive line or trade that number one pick for multiple picks. Yeah. And then draft some offensive.
Yeah. Draft in bulk.
Yes. Yes.
For sure. Hey, I can get down with that logic. I think Evan Neal has the potential to be the best player in this draft. Just the way he moves, it's as much of a mauler as he is on the offensive line and where he comes from. Those Alabama offensive linemen, it's not like Alabama quarterbacks. They go to the NFL and they succeed. So
yeah,
I could certainly see Evan Neal being that pick and being the right pick.
Yep, for sure. So, all righty, as we close out this episode of Tailgate Trash Talk, Gary, any final thoughts?
No, excited for next week. Should be a good show. And then if you could stick around, we'll be talking baseball here in a few minutes.
Yes, sir. I'm right there with you. And no closing remarks from me other than I'm excited for next week's draft show, and that will be next Thursday at 8:00. So thank you again, Gary, for another great episode of Tailgate Trash Talk, and we are out.